Recording started. And also we have Joe Schroeder from DPA membership, who can help with questions in the chat. And then I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague Yael, who's on the DPA board with me. And please go ahead and take it away.
I will. Hello. Thank you, JR. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very excited to have this conversation for a host of reasons. I can think of three really quickly. One, I really loved the film Life After. I was able to see it when it was at Sundance on virtual from the comfort of my couch. And just thought it was incredibly provocative and changed my mind on some things. So if you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend it. If you doesn't not need to be seen for this conversation at all, one of the other reasons I'm really excited to be doing this, besides Colleen is awesome and super talented, is I also have a film that is beginning this journey. And then I wouldn't say like I flipped, I'd say I very thoroughly like underline Colleen's incredibly comprehensive case study report. Um, it's long, but it has so much information and filled in all these questions that I've been having and can't seem to get the answer from anyone on in a direct way. So I'm just really jazzed that we're able to do this now because I have all these questions. So we're gonna jump in, and then if you have questions, like JR said, please drop them in the chat, or and we will get to them at like the last 10-15 minutes, depending. Um, but also if there's things you want clarified during the conversation, you can drop those in as well. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce Colleen, who is amazing. She's the VP of Productions at Multitude, and she produced Reed's second feature, which we're talking about, Life After, which did win the Documentary Special Jury Award at Sundance in 25. She also produced To Use a Mountain, which won Special Jury Award at Visions in 2025. So that was obviously very busy time for Colleen, and produced the IDA nominated shorts collection Queer Futures, which you can watch as I have on Criterion. Hi, Colleen.
Hello, thanks for that introduction. And I think also Joe might be dropping some links in the chat soon in case you haven't seen Life After. Um, would love for you to watch it after. Um, yeah, thank you so much for having me, Yael. I'm excited for this conversation. And I think we're also going to share the full case study link too, in case that's something you want to like. I think I'll share my screen for parts of it, but if you want to follow along or peruse through it, feel free.
Great. Okay, so then let's just jump right in the beginning and try and set the stage for us. Like, what is Multitude, where this film was produced through, and how did you get involved with Life After, and just sort of set the stage for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So Multitude Films is an independent documentary production company. We produce and EP features and shorts, and we make films that are really oriented around challenging dominant cultural narratives. We think about like narrative change and culture change is the real sort of like what makes a Multitude film. Um, that's how we sort of build our slate and how we and is also incorporated into sort of how we make films alongside and integrated with movements, and that plays into how we make films and also importantly how we release them into the world and what we hope they achieve. So um, I we partnered with Reed in 2021 to make this film, and I developed it with him for a long time, and then we came on board formally, and then and made the thing, and then it premiered in 25. And I guess some grounding logistics that I think are good sort of orientating facts to like position where I'm speaking from as a producer, where the what kind of the film was poised to do. So the film, we raised a $1.1 million budget through an ITVS co-production and grants. And then we raised $400,000 for distribution and impact, which is like incredible and not the circumstances that everyone is working within. We were really, really lucky. And we raised that distribution and impact budget mostly through folks who had funded the production of the film, And specifically, of course, as a Sundance acceptance can be, that was also a milestone. We had raised the budget, and so we were able to raise for our launch and distribution at that milestone. So that's I think that's a really important context because the case study like has a lot of stuff in it. We were able to try a lot of things, experiment in a lot of ways. And that was possible because our time was covered. Whoa, I just got really big on my screen. Um, Great. Okay. Thanks for being here too. Um, and so I think that's really important to name. My labor on the film was covered. Reed's labor on the film through distribution was covered. And that's a huge way that we were able to achieve what we were able to do. It's also a function of sort of the way that we produce at Multitude with, we're a team of 4 producers as well as other staff that support the infrastructure for our producing. And so this is a model that like I don't know, we always be thinking about how we can sustain ourselves better as producers, and especially when, I think we're in a moment where distribution is feeling like it needs to be incorporated into our producing practice as an extension of what it means to produce a film in this current landscape. And so building those skills and those skills, relationships, that muscle is really important, but we need the resourcing to do it and to be able to spend the kind of time we need to do it well. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to set up at the start.
Great. Okay, so when I was going through the case study, I was just pulling out some questions that um, I was most curious about. So the first one was just going through the order of your report was how you identified your target audiences sort of from the beginning. And you had listed two specific discrete audiences. And so could you talk about what those were and how you came to those two? Was that obvious from the beginning that that was who you were trying to make the film for? Or was that more of a conversation you had once you entered this distribution phase? And were there other audiences you considered that you rejected?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this film in particular had some unique traits about it. It's like it takes on a really controversial issue, and we knew setting out to make this film, our target audience whose mind we wanted to change were our like fellow progressives, like sort of mainstream audience, progressive documentary audiences, including our own sort of like doc film community. And that's kind of rare for documentaries. Like we're not often making films in that way. But so that sort of like offered a unique opportunity that was exciting. And then alongside that, which has sort of um, separate goals and also distribution pathways, are the community that we made the film within, like from alongside, which is the disability community, who like already understand the film's arguments, and the goals in reaching those core audiences are like, how can we amplify the perspectives and the voices that have been sort of saying what is in the content of the film for many, many decades, offer like a space that's around community and coalition building. And so there's sort of like, who are we in solidarity with and whose mind do we want to change? We want to do both of those things, and they require different sort of tactics. And I think like also just to say, there are always or often like so many possible audiences. Like the other audiences we were thinking about are like medical students, medical professionals, like students of all kinds, journalists, because the media is super ableist and that sort of underpins everything. Faith communities or like conservative audiences who might be aligned with the film's perspective, but for different reasons. Like there are so many different uh, other types of audiences we could like, and just haven't had the energy or the capacity to try to reach, because those take sort of extra layers of capacity and coordination and avenues. And so I don't think a film can do everything, as much as like I really had to work on myself, just like, okay, what are the most important things we want to achieve, because our energy and time and resources are always going to be limited, and like let's really be really strategic about what we want to achieve and where we put those. So yeah.
So does that mean you didn't at all reach out to those other groups that you mentioned, or those were just not the primary, but sort of in your free time, you were also finding whatever the medical school was near the screening?
Yeah, we definitely did do that research, did do different layers of outreach at different times, but it was sort of always secondary. We didn't build the strategy in whole primarily around those audiences. And so for that reason, like I don't necessarily feel like I can confidently, proudly say like we moved the needle in X ways for like the particular audience of like medical students who are ingrained with ableism, and we wanted to like shift how disability is talked about in those educational settings. I know that medical students saw the film, but I don't, they just weren't our sort of primary audience that we were really targeting, and like trying to really understand what have we achieved here, what are the results and outcomes that we can sort of stand behind. I have less of a sense of that because we didn't sort of orient our survey gathering around that with a knowledge of like how those audiences in particular were responding to the film. So it's more just about like where the center of gravity of our energy was.
Got it. Okay. So you have your two target audiences sort of identified. This is after your premiere at Sundance, and then you decide that you're going to do a theatrical and you're going to do a hybrid theatrical, which means that you're going to play physically in movie theaters while also be doing like a virtual theatrical. Are we calling it a virtual theatrical run, or is it called, what were you calling
Yeah,
it?
I called it a hybrid theatrical run that had eventized in-person screenings paired with virtual screenings that were sort of like a companion to those. I think there are a couple things I want to also name first that just set up like the overall strategy of the district, because like the theatrical, it took a lot of time to plan, and it like seemed like a really big milestone, but it was really just one piece and one tactic of a much larger strategy. So like, the case study begins in really naming like some of the key takeaways first, but and one of them is like um rights retention provides room to experiment. So basically, we entered Sundance with an ITVS co-production and an insured broadcast on independent lens that we advocated for it to be in the late fall. So we knew we had 10 months essentially between our premiere and the broadcast to do whatever we wanted and experiment, and like really we took that on with excitement because we knew, okay, an all rights deal is off the table. It was probably unlikely anyway. Like that's why we accepted the ITVS co-production the year earlier. And so we knew that we wanted to work with an international sales agent, but we decided that Multitude, the film team, me as a producer, Multitude would like be our own US sales agent and manage the rest of the rights ourselves. And so we really entered distribution with wanting to experiment, and like a key goal of our distribution be to like learn a bunch of stuff and like get better at doing this work in general, which to serve our work more broadly. So for that reason, yeah, like the theatrical was one piece. So in general, we saw an opportunity to collapse windows. Traditionally, like you do your festivals for a year or however long, and then you think about educational, and then you think, and then non theatrical, and then you think about when are you going to make that SVOD deal? Like it's really it can take so long to get through the distribution of a film, and it sort of is never ending. But what we wanted to do is experiment with throwing all that traditional logic out the window and really create as many access points for an audience to the film over these 10 months and beyond as possible. And so that meant collapsing festival, theatrical, non-theatrical, educational, and direct distribution windows as well. And this was my first time doing the sort of direct distribution, doing a deep dive on the kinema and the gather, and like really rolling up my sleeves and understanding the nitty gritty of how each of those work and how best to leverage them. So yeah, we really took like a um, let's throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And like whatever we try, it's okay if we fail. We just want to create as many opportunities as possible, and thinking about audience building as soon as possible, starting really incrementally, like after the Sundance launch, doing these tiny little experiments with Gather partner TVOD that like they were cool. Did they have a huge reach? No. Did they make much revenue? Not like barely, but we could start building that audience immediately. And at every sort of milestone, it grew, and then we could bring those folks along for every other opportunity that there was to engage with the film and build word of mouth and share it with their friends and like keep that community around the film growing. So that was sort of the goal there. And then yeah,
Oh,
this is
okay.
what I called it.
There you call it. Hybrid eventized theatrical run centered on impact and accessibility. And you did not
Mouthful.
work with a booker. You did it all yourself.
Yeah, so as part of our sort of like ongoing learning about what it means to lead distribution for our films, I had practiced kind of like self-booking a theatrical run a couple of years earlier with a short series that I produced called Queer Futures that you mentioned earlier. And that was kind of a funny little opportunity. It's like an omnibus kind of, or we envisioned it being programmed as sort of an omnibus of shorts, like a 60-minute program. They're fun, they're queer, they're like speculative and like really fun shorts. And so I was just like, let me just learn what it is like to reach out to programmers and theaters and pitch the film and how does it all work, what are the norms, how do you talk about it, how do you negotiate, what are the terms. And so I had practice doing that before with no marketing or travel budget at all, but I learned a lot and was set up to be able to self book a theatrical run for Life After, which I knew would be limited, like 10 cities, and like take it from there and build on all of that. So it wasn't like it really. Filmmakers are talking about this more and more about like I think theatricals remain something that filmmakers see as a sign of prestige. Like if you have a theatrical run, that means you have a real film or something like that. And it's to do with the sort of awards positioning. But like sometimes nobody shows up. You're not going to make any money. You're going to spend a whole bunch of money. Like the only way to have a good turnout is to like have the filmmaker there or set up some kind of a Q&A. It's a ton of work. So I think it's definitely worth interrogating why we do theatrical runs and what other pathways we might employ and what other markers or metrics of success we might start talking about. I think that's the provocation I'll throw into the world. But so after doing our own interrogation, we decided that we did want to do a theatrical run for a few key reasons. One of our core audiences, as I said earlier, is like progressive audiences who think they're hip and cool, or at least like they go to the theater and so that was actually the place to reach those audiences was art house theaters. And yeah, I think it's also worth differentiating from like it wasn't an AMC theater run like we employed with a different film that had different goals. We were really intentional about the why of the art house run. We wanted to build a word of mouth in the lead up to our next distribution milestone, which was the broadcast. I think that's also a key thing. It's like, to what end are you trying to? I think the major purpose of a theatrical run in practice is building visibility and word of mouth, but you need like toward what end? Like where's it going to go next? If there's not really an answer to that question, I'm sort of like, there's got to be something more. Like, do you put a bunch of resources into a TVOD launch right after? Not sure. There has to be something after. So
Well,
we have our
that's
broadcast coming
Lydia's
up.
question in the chat was what goals did you set for
Mm,
distribution, which I feel like you're kind of touching on. And it sounds like maybe they were different for different stages of the film, like you're saying, like they're leading from one to the other. But I'm curious if you had any concrete and how you would even know that you had reached them.
yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the bottom lines that we had for ourselves as a team were less about revenue and prestige, although, everyone wants the New York Times review and the whatever. We did too. I'm not saying we didn't. But more about impact. So we really felt the urgency for us. Distribution was always going to be really integrated with impact. In many cases, like I think they're really intertwined in general most of the time. You make an impact by having people see your film if that's the only thing they do, and ideally you're building an impact campaign that is creative. It like offers creative distribution pathways and brings the film to more people and can make strategic sort of shifts for those audiences. So I would say like this is kind of a broad answer, but like generally we were thinking about impact, culture change, and specifically around what was happening when the film was released last year was big threats and debates about Medicaid cuts, and then that legislation was actually passed. So the goal of the theatrical was also impact. So bringing curating panels and conversations at each panel with at each screening with lawyers and journalists and organizers and disabled artists and all kinds of people. That's sort of summarized here. But yeah, that was, I think, impact and culture change is our sort of overall bottom line.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I had was about sort of these different partners that you're showing right here. Were those partnerships that you had beforehand, pre-existing relationships either Reed had from his own life and past films, or are you reaching out to new organizations cold, and sort of how are you navigating finding partners in that way? What were you offering them? What was the sales pitch?
Yeah, I mean, many of these partners were folks that we had met and started building relationships from the earliest. Some of them we had known from the early stages of making the film. That's often, I mean, that's really how Multitude makes films is with and alongside movements, and so that's part of our casting and research process. It's part of making the film. It's just like we rely on that expertise and nuance to help us make the most artistically compelling and nuanced film possible. So yeah, some of like the anchor organizations we had been building with for a while. A lot of these folks, some of these folks are like Reed's friends or like, fellow like authors that he, is friends with, things like that. A professor. And then I would say like maybe they're random connections too, but they were organic, not just sort of like cold outreach. I would say maybe the only cold outreach we did that's striking me right now is this journalist. And I would say like generally journalists are great people to reach out cold. They can sort of like do an analysis of like the value of participating in that event and bring their expertise and be excited about things like that. So that sort of made sense. And she remained. And so then the theatrical, even if this was often the first time we were engaging these partners with an ask, it was the groundwork we needed to then like later in the rollout, we could ask them for something else. We could have them host a virtual Q&A, or they would decide they wanted to host a community screening, or they would promote XYZ, or they just became, it deepened throughout. So the theatrical was a great way for us to, it's a two-way street. We're offering them opportunities to speak about their work. And so, yeah.
Great. I think we talked about this a little bit already, but the decision to do virtual screenings with Gather alongside the theatrical specifically, I think you were saying something about audience and sort of how did you find pairing those things together? Was that something you would
Yeah.
recommend? Is that specific to your film because of its own topic?
Yeah. It definitely grew out of our desire to make the theatrical run. Theatrical, like the in-person theater experience is not very accessible. And of course, a core audience was disabled audiences. We were keenly aware that that doesn't necessarily match the goals that we set out for ourselves. And so the hybrid strategy was really intended to increase both physical accessibility as well as financial accessibility, because virtual screenings were supported by a pay it forward fund on Gather. So it really grew out of that. And it was required a lot of coordination. It was like self-booking a theatrical run is enough work. And then to add 16 virtual screenings windowed days after each one and to market them appropriately, because we couldn't, turns out I didn't know how geo-blocking worked. Apparently our geo-blocking technology is not good. So and anyway, anyone could technically access any virtual screening, but we wanted it to contribute to the feel of like a national roadshow tour. And so we would market, let me see if I have it. We would market them locally as well anyway. And so it required a lot of trial and error. And like it was a messy kind of chaotic planning process as we were, trying to weigh decisions of what would be most strategic. Even something like, do we want to set the virtual screenings up in a way that is a window, a TVOD window, a short TVOD window, like so they have 24 hours to watch at their own convenience. I was like, oh, that seems convenient. People want to, if they're going to watch at home, they're going to want to watch whenever they want to watch. But at the same time, we're losing the like sense of tuning in as a community for the same event, the sort of like, yeah, the eventized thing, the chat. Ultimately, we went with the Showtime setup to mirror the theatrical experience. But all these kinds of decisions we were navigating that feel really big and tiny at the same time.
And do you think
I
that
don't
that,
know if I would, yeah, sorry.
oh yeah, that was the word I
Yeah,
was
I
going
think
to say.
we built this strategy specifically around accessibility with the disabled community in mind. So it's not something I would recommend like off the top of my head for anyone to try, but I think you can try things that you're told is not the way it's done. Like I had no idea how the art house theaters would reply when I pitched them. I was like, so we want to do this thing for accessibility and I don't know if it'll cannibalize our in-person audience is, but it's just like it's really important to us. And would you consider listing those showtimes on your website too, even though we're hosting them? And we did affiliate links, which is sort of interesting, I guess. But anyway, they like I had no idea what the reply would be, and they were like, most of them were all like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. We don't like we're down. Um,
So the
and the
physical
take,
movie theater, to clarify,
yeah,
like the physical movie theater is also posting on their website the virtual screening and
yeah,
selling, but the virtual screening, they're not getting ticket sales. It's just linking directly to the Gather link from their website,
it's linking directly to Gather from their
and
website.
they're
But
kosher with that. Yeah.
because we did affiliate links, I could track how many tickets came from their link, and I promised them the same kind of
Oh,
split,
you did.
ticket split.
Okay.
Yeah, which was like, not much. We're not talking about it like a real financial incentive, but they understood the value of it. And it's not nothing, like it's always a hit or miss whether the theater is going to break even just on taking a risk to program your film. So yeah,
Right. And it also allowed you to do a pay what you want price for the virtual
yeah,
tickets, right?
yeah.
Um, okay. So I'm gonna move us into broadcast. Does that feel okay for you,
Sure.
Colleen?
I'm going to stop sharing my screen though, so I can just see the chat and
Okay.
see people if that's okay.
Well, after that, though, did you guys see how beautiful her deck layout is? I'm just like blown. It's so beautiful and well designed. Um, and y'all can't see this, but Colleen has a printed version of her case study that she was referencing when we
Oh
were.
yeah, I just printed one and it's really fun. It makes me feel
It's
like
so nice.
I've actually
We
achieved
make these
something.
things that you can't touch. And just the idea that you made a book for yourself of your impact. Yeah, Joe, totally. It's incredible. Okay, so
Okay,
we're
I'm just reading these questions too.
moving into broadcast. So you're going on Independent Lens, and they have a 90-day YouTube exclusive. And as PBS has been really vocal about sort of emphasizing more on their YouTube in that window, I'm just curious, like how do we think about that window? It feels like sometimes we should be really pushing and promoting our broadcast because that's obviously where it's going to get more eyeballs than on movie theaters or TVOD. At the same time, it's not revenue building and we're not getting any data from the
Yeah.
audience. So we're not necessarily building the community that we want and can't engage in the impact that we would want. So how did you guys think about like, was this 90-day window on YouTube something awesome? Do you wish it was 30 days? Like, how do you, or 120, who knows? Like, how did you guys think about it?
Yeah. It's a really good question. It's like filled with different kinds of frictions, I think, in terms of a filmmaker's relationship with ITBS and PBS, which on the one hand is like so foundational to was like the key anchor in our distribution strategy is like the milestone towards the end. It wasn't the end, but like around which to sort of orient and build towards, which also is the thing that allowed us to do all of the experimentation in the first place, but because we were able to retain all of the rest of the rights and that they share a value around impact and educational and letting us do direct distribution, like, it's incredible. And at the same time, their priorities are to like sustain PBS and like viewers excited about PBS. And that's great that I also share that goal, but it's not my direct goal for the film and as our film team. Like I'm gonna always want to market it in a slightly different way. I'm gonna want to use different imagery than the ones that I provided them, but like they have, there are these frictions that emerge in the rollout that I sort of anticipated, and there were sort of other things I didn't anticipate. But in general, my approach was to like welcome their strategy and the fact that they put real marketing energy and dollars and muscle behind marketing the broadcast. but let me focus my energy and labor on in the lead up to that to get the things that are important to me, which is like visibility, more press, press opportunities that bring the issues of, at the film in the film to more audiences, like getting to know my audiences, capturing that data, and yeah, making a little bit of revenue where possible, and that was all possible alongside the broadcast. So I feel really like it didn't undermine our strategy at all. It was like a huge added benefit. And I see the kind of like, the so-called millions of people that encounter the film through PBS, although we never really know exactly how many, um, as different audiences than the ones that I have direct access to and I'm cultivating. And so, of course, I want that reach, and I would never be able to achieve it by myself. So let me focus on building the kinds of relationships with audience members that will sustain, whether it's the multitude of it all, or read as a director and build those audiences across each of our future projects. And so that's sort of how I thought about it. You make it work for you, and it's never going to be frictionless.
Right, because the goals are going to be different, and how do you assess? So then when you're doing these other screenings, not with the YouTube or the broadcast necessarily, you're trying to build your audience and you're collecting this data. And so I'm wondering, um, are you bringing clipboards and physically having someone there at in-person screenings? You said in the report that you had a QR study, a QR code that was going up post screenings. Can you talk about like really like specifically, like how are you, for
Sure.
me specifically, because
Yeah.
I to know as I'm embarking on this in the fall, what data are you collecting and how are you using it? And are you putting that in MailChimp and segmenting by groups, just sort of all of that?
Yeah. Our main strategy was to put a QR code during as early as like during festival Q&As for that to be our Q&A holding card, um, and during theatrical screenings as well. And yeah, I mean, I know tons of people who have large success with the clipboard method or whatever it is. I think there are lots of creative ways to do that. I don't, I think you should choose what is most easy for you to coordinate and based on who of your team is going to be on the ground. The QR code was something that, because our team wasn't doing a ton of, we weren't going to every single festival. So we wanted to have it be something that we could, well, I think festivals in general, we sort of forget about it, like our audiences. And yeah, many of them are our film community, but many of them aren't too. They're local. If we want to come back for a theatrical screening or a community screening, we really wanted to be sort of getting to know them and having that option. So that's why we started so early with that. I mean, I can't say I was like the most rigorous and the most organized in terms of like collecting it, storing it, and then utilizing to its best and highest purpose. Like it sort of felt like a little bit messy at the time, but yeah, generally it would be like, okay, collecting all the names, emails, and where they're based, and bringing them into our newsletter list and alerting, and then building our future communications with them around future opportunities for them to engage with the film, not necessarily about like summarizing impact updates. Like we want there to be something that they can forward to a friend or like re-engage, that feels like there's an offering to them. So yeah, so that they wouldn't feel like, okay, I saw the film, I don't need to keep following it. Like we wanted to, yeah, I don't know how to gauge how successful it was really, but like that data is important to have. It's really important to have, yeah, to be able to, yeah, keep them in the loop and help drive, like bring in new people. It's like the one tool we have. Otherwise, it feels we're just like sending films into the ether.
Yeah. And then you're emailing afterwards, or like if you're playing at a festival in Chicago and then you get some
Mm-hmm.
people that sign up from Chicago, but then you're doing, your eventized theatrical in Chicago 2 months late. Like, were you being able
Yeah,
to
after
track and then send group things, or you're sending monthly emails? Like, how often are you bombarding or engaging with your
we did start doing like at the day after email follow-ups with ways for them to get involved in impact stuff, whether that's around Medicaid cuts or health, like whatever it is, that we were fine tuning as we went along, what that actually looked like. We also sent out a survey, which helped. us understand more about who the audience is, what they think, whether they, how the film affected them, if they had any ideas about where else the film should screen. Helped inform our impact research and campaign. And yeah, just again, like I'm sure that there was some that it could have been more sharp, more like exact. Like I always wanted to put everything in there, and I know that's not the best strategy, and I had to like pull
Totally.
back and
I
think
want
about
all the information.
I know I want them to have everything they need or will ever wonder about the film. But
Yeah.
yeah,
People don't love filling out surveys, it turns out. I personally welcome it as like a 15-minute distraction in my day whenever I get like an IDA one. I'm like, I'm going to do this immediately. And then
that's
anyway,
so funny.
that might just be
We
me.
got a surprising. I was really skeptical about how many people would fill out the surveys, so I was pleasantly
Yeah,
surprised at the depth of engagement. But it is self-selecting in a way,
right.
of the
It's
people
just
who were,
mostly me. I'm just doing that over and over again,
yeah, the weirdo.
repeating. Okay, we have so many good questions in the thing, so I just want to move quickly through this last part of questions that I had about your PR impact and social. So you worked with two different publicists. You worked with a film publicist, and then you worked with someone that was more issue focused. And then again, not to overshare, but that is about the path that I'm embarking on my current project of working with someone who is just a traditional film publicist and is fantastic, and then also who is like trying to find someone who does publicity specifically on the issue of my film and how to reach that audience that isn't going to be, the generic documentary audience. And so, can you just talk about like how did that work, and is that more headache than it's worth because you're juggling multiple like people, etc.
Yeah, this is a piece that I feel is the richest opportunity. Like I want anyone who feels inspired by this approach to try it also and then tell me how it goes and what you learn. And
Okay.
like I the impetus behind this was, okay, we all know that there are a handful of amazing industry publicists. We lean on them to get us that New York Times review or to, give us the kind of visibility we want, but it's mostly on the entertainment pages and in the trades and for a particular kind of positioning. But our in many cases, our documentaries are, have other goals in terms of the culture change goals and the narrative shift we want to see, we want to have our audiences have. And we know that like many people won't actually watch the film. They will encounter a clip online or the just the trailer or just a piece of press about it. And so to be able to do that work as much as possible in those other forums as well is really important. And so we talked to a handful of folks. There aren't that many. It was a lot of learning process, and I like would be starting from scratch on whatever film it is we try this on next, of like doing a field scan for who that right partner would be. Um, but the goal was to get press coverage off the entertainment pages that centered the issue, that still talked about the film, but like was focused on sort of the messaging around the film that we wanted to make. I don't There were just so many hard lessons we learned that like I don't that are really interesting, and I'm so curious to hear like which of those lessons would continue to be hard for other folks as they try this, or which were specific to our film and the particular barriers around the subject matter of the film and the news cycle at the time. And but I think a lot of it will be universal challenges around like uh, you know um the news cycle and how stretched our movements are and how to like fewer and fewer independent journalists. It's just like it's tough, but it also feels really important and underexplored. So I'm still curious about it, even if it was like probably quote unquote like the biggest like failure or like learning experience of all the experiments we tried. Um, yeah. So we worked our the partner we worked with is called Inevitable Influence, and they're a PR firm focused on the global disability audience. And so they helped us shape pitches and create press targets to pitch for this kind of coverage. Um, so that was a good chunk of the work they did, but also what they did is just like help us get people to screenings, promote, identify partners, build relationships, think about how to market and advertise the screenings, just additional support with that. So we would have like, yeah, a weekly meeting with them and then a weekly meeting that sometimes they would also join our industry publicist meeting as well. Um, yeah.
Hmm. Well, if
Uh,
anyone has any experience with also having multiple publicists to tackle different angles, please like say so in the chat and maybe we can have a sidebar conversation later because it does seem to me like sort of it's not as charted territory as maybe
yeah.
it could be to how to get out of, like you said, the entertainment pages and onto the more issue ones. Um, and then I don't know, I have a question about Instagram, but I feel like the other people's questions were better. So I'll save that. And then I'm
Great.
just gonna see if we have a lull. I feel like the first question I
Oh,
can go
Yael, do
back.
you want me to chime in here? I've been keeping track of them in the chat.
Oh yeah,
Questions
Joe.
in the chat? Okay, great.
Yes.
Let me jump in here. I got you. The first one that was in there was from Gordon. The question was, what was the relationship with the Ford Foundation? And were they instrumental in any form of outreach and impact financing? I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, Colleen.
Yeah, the Ford Foundation was a funder for our of the film's production, and then they also came on with impact funding as well. And we just wrapped out our impact campaign. They hosted a screening of the film last month, or I guess late April, maybe just over a month ago now. That was really special, a final sort of event.
The next
Um,
ones are is like a two-parter for you, Colleen. Olivia's
okay.
asking, hi Olivia, by the way, what percentage of your impact and distribution budget did you earmark for PR? Which is interesting now that we've talked about that double publicist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Situation you got going on there. Well, how much did you earmark for PR, marketing, digital advertising, etc.? And also, Andrew kind of wants to know a little bit, digging in a little bit further to this, how much was spent internally to support your team's own efforts? This is obviously
Mm-hmm.
something we see on so many teams that it's like, oh, I'm doing all this marketing and distribution myself, and how do I provide for myself to either get paid or how that's a whole nother job even after the film is done. So
Yeah. Great. I'm looking at my cost report right now, so I can give you some firm numbers. I so we earmarked so we earmarked we budgeted for publicity around the Sundance launch. That was its own thing, pretty standard. We negotiated a very favorable, appreciated discount, and then I budgeted for publicity for the theatrical run only 15K, and what I spent was like $59,000 on industry PR, the additional disability focused PR firm, and then we hired Tikkun Olam Productions to help us with a social media build out quite late in our journey through basically now. And so we had these three partners. Um, yeah, it's a lot. So like essentially 60K was what we spent on those various partners. In addition to, we have our own social media coordinator at Multitude who supported on certain things too. So their time was covered in a separate line in this budget too. So it's a lot. Um, in terms of our team time, we budgeted for and raised a monthly fee for Reed, for the director, for 12 months, and then a monthly fee for me, the producer, leading distribution, basically full time, for 18 months. And our impact producer, which was part time, also a Multitude staff member, Emma Alpert, who also had a monthly fee for. It was kind of a patchwork of how we how it played out. And so in terms of numbers, let me see. Oh, I'm looking at travel right now. Where's the actual fees? So we're looking at numbers like 30K for the director's participation in the distribution rollout, 45K for Multitudes for me over at full-time work over a longer period of time, and like somewhere in between there for the impact producer, which was also really intensive work and very intertwined with the distribution rollout. So those are some numbers.
Colleen,
Where I think it's really like more than most filmmakers are able to pay themselves by far.
Yeah, did you talk about how you were able to raise that additional 400 for impact? Was that the
Briefly,
same people, the same places that you were funding the production, or did you think about those separately?
yeah, briefly I talked about it. It was the majority of funders who had supported production in some way came, the majority of the funders were folks who had already supported the film and then came on for additional impact funding. We and primarily by Perspective Fund. And then a couple additional funders that came around the Sundance launch that we were able to allocate to distribution. And then we also put all of the revenue that we made back into distribution, which is, not much, just like 25, 30K.
Okay. Okay. Great follow-up, Yael. Oh my God. And great. Again, there's a thank you for your transparency in the chat, which I think we all thank you for your transparency, Colleen. That was amazing. The minute you said cost report, I almost passed out. So amazing.
Yesterday I was like, yeah, should I share my cost report on screen? And I was like, I'll just say the
I'll just
numbers.
say
We don't need
it.
to be.
I'll just say it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
We've got a really good one from Julia that I was wondering the same thing. How did you gain access to the right contacts to pitch those art house venues without a booker, right? Because you said you went outside of that realm. Were you just Googling for a theater number? Were you cold calling? What was the process like for that?
Yeah. So back when I did the self-booking like experiment with the Queer Future series a couple years ago, I spent um like dozens and dozens of hours building out this master spreadsheet of every contact that I could find. And I've kept it updated over the years as I hear people changing. I've also gone to Index a couple times. I'm going soon for my third year, which is the combination of the Film Festival Alliance and Art House Convergence. And so all of the programmers at theaters everywhere are there. And so I get that contact list and meet them in person and get their business cards and flesh it out and update it. And yeah. It was a lot of work to build out on the front end. And so I needed to do some refreshing, but that's how I had it. And there are a number of theaters that I don't have that isn't listed publicly. And in some cases I've heard other filmmakers talk about calling theaters. That's something I've never done. And I don't know if I would do it, but people have had success booking theaters that way. I don't know exactly what the conversation would be. Like if you call the general manager and how do you convince them to connect you to the programmer? Like, I don't know. I have no idea, but worth a try. But it's also just to say, like, I know that a lot of filmmakers are doing this kind of, self-booking pitching these days, and theater, art house theater staff are so stretched, which is so evident in like how hard they work, but also how limited their like time and energy is to help answer all your minute questions about your particular screening, and they just have so much going on and are strapped in a way that makes sense. And so I'm just also really think it's important that we think about our role as a partner in the general ecosystem. And it's great for us to break down the silos between filmmakers and exhibitors. And also I want to do that in a really responsible way, that because we're all underwater. And so I do things like, I never want to, sort of industry standard terms for a screening might be a $350 minimum versus a 35% split, meaning that you're guaranteed something, no matter how many tickets you sell. And then you break into that 35 split once you've reached that. But I much prefer to do like a 50-50 split, so that I'm never in a situation where the theater is losing money and I feel terrible. They don't trust me that we make good films and want to invite me back. Like it's important that this works for all of us. So that's just something I'm thinking about in terms of our relationships generally with theaters.
A great larger question that maybe we'll have time for from our other co-host Tiffany, that we might get to about the larger industry structure, but we'll get there. The last one from the chat is Gordon again. Hi, Gordon. It says this is a really interesting one. As an advocacy film, for lack of a better expression, did the film's relationship with CBC and the Canadian government writ large improve and sustain itself? That's a really interesting, for our north of the border talks that we keep having, right? In terms of distribution here, it seems healthier, but who knows if it actually is. So if you can weigh in on that, Colleen, that would be wonderful.
Okay, I think I need a little bit more clarification. The film's relationship with the Canadian government
Yes.
improve? I'm not sure I
With
totally understand.
CBC, did the film's relationship with CBC and the Canadian government improve and sustain itself? I think, Gordon, if you want to jump on and clarify a little bit more, please feel free. But my reading is that did it help the film sustain itself because of its relationship with the Canadian government?
Well, the film doesn't really have a relationship with the Canadian government, and our Canadian broadcaster was actually not CBC but TVO. Um, so yeah, I'm trying to understand. I mean, the film takes kind of a very combative stance towards the Canadian government. Um, but yeah, I'm not totally sure. I mean, I can speak about our Canadian broadcast, which was quite tricky to intersperse with our the issues depicted.
Interject, Colleen.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
speaking about the issue
okay.
depicted. Thank you, Gordon.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't think the Canadian government has taken notice of our film really. So we didn't sort of experience any kinds of anxieties or worries about that. But yeah, I hope that it moved audiences, and unfortunately, it's sort of like a cautionary tale for U.S. audiences, given that the legislation in Canada has already passed, and the film is about the fallout of that underway. Sorry if I didn't answer what you were getting at, but I did my best.
Yael, we're up to your question about Instagram, if you want to pose
Oh,
it.
my question, I'm ready. Okay. Okay. So for Instagram, you were saying that you were encouraged to have a dedicated Instagram page for the film. And that was just a question that I had because I'm not on social media, and was encouraged that one, I should be on social media, and that instead of trying to build out social media for each of my films, because my films are thematically linked, that I should just be focusing on myself and to try and have like post for all of my films, just building my own page, my own brand, as it were. Ugh, sorry, Naomi Klein's no logo is just like embalmed in my teenage brain. But Reed does also make similarly, like makes films that sort of are all on theme. And so I was surprised that wasn't the advice that you got. So I'm wondering how you feel about that and why that made sense. And do you feel good about that in
Sure.
retrospect?
Yeah, I think about it like, I mean, so on the one hand, like Reed was absolutely collabing and sharing and like a part of much of the content, that not all of it though. Like the most important and salient things that were originating from our film specific account. And that's in part, I think, like Reed isn't all over social media either. Doesn't want to, like, it would essentially mean handing over his entire Instagram to someone else to run it and produce that content. He wasn't interested in like being the engine behind that. And so I think, but that's, it's a filmmaker by filmmaker sort of analysis, I think. For me, what I'm thinking about, when does it make sense? And so also Multitude has an account too. And historically we promote all of our films through that account, and only sometimes in rare cases break out a film specific handle. And that was sort of the piece of learning for us around like there's a value that I that a basically fundamentally I think there's a difference between using social media to like promote the prestigious like milestones and the flashy moments of the film, and then to use like that's one way to use it. It's important. And that stuff I think is like the kind of stuff that Reed collabed on in his thing, and the Multitude collabed on. But then there's the other function of using social media as a hub or like a space to do other kinds of work beyond that includes like, you know, um, growing the like creating a space for community to have conversations about the film, even have conversations that transcends what's in the film itself, like building word of mouth, and um, like also building partnerships in different ways, like online partnerships with like influencers or journalists or whatever it is. Like there's different kinds of social media like organizing work that can happen in that specific space that's different than just like promoting, oh, we got nominated for the Emmys, that's so great. That's a different kind of work. And so just thinking strategically about they're related, but like, what's the best what do you want to be doing? It's a lot of labor to create this kind of content. What's the best way for your film? What can that configuration look like?
Great. We have 2 minutes left. Joe, do you want to ask Tiffany's
Yeah,
question?
yeah, I think we should. Let's pose that one. I think so. From our partner in crime, Tiffany Fisher Love, a wonderful question for you, Colleen. What do you think we can
Oh
all
my
do?
gosh.
It's big scale, big picture. What do you think we can all do for a healthy, equitable, independent film ecosystem? Any ideas on how we build it? I think you edge towards
Lord
this,
have mercy.
talking about, right, treating those art houses as right as other people and other organizations that we partner with. I think that's a nice place to kind of like bring us all together.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? If depending on what comes out of my mouth next, wouldn't that be nice? I don't know. I mean, I think so everything that the question is framed kind of as like, how can we all do our part? And I think the challenges we face are so deep and so systemic and um are relate to a lot of things either out of our control or out of our sphere of what we all have the energy to organize around, given that we're trying to survive and also make art. So it's a really tough answer. I was hoping we could open this one up to the full floor here. Although I know we're out of time, so we're just stuck with my vague replies. But I would love if anyone wants to follow up and share any other ideas. Like I'm in such a like I just want to keep learning from each other and share and like being really transparent and like ultimately I think like the biggest takeaway of the case